So obviously, it is a very exciting time to be an Atari collector. With the release of the 2600 Plus, it's easier than ever to play your Atari games on your modern TV. But besides the release of the console, we actually got for the first time in over 30 years a brand new Atari 2600 game, Mr. Run and Jump. Now, if you have the Atari 2600 Plus, or if you've been following its development, chances are you've probably heard about this game, but I just want to give a quick overview about the game and give my thoughts on it. This is not going to be a very extensive review, partly because there's not much to this game, which I will get into. But yeah, so let's get started. Now, this game came out in 2023, and the question is, how on earth did we get a brand new Atari 2600 cartridge produced by Atari in 2023? Well, the answer lies with Graphite Labs and John McCullough. So John McCullough is a programmer at the developer Graphite Lab. So this game started as a side project of his because he wanted to develop a game for the original Atari 2600. It actually ended up evolving and releasing as a more fleshed out game on modern consoles and platforms like the Atari VCS. I think it's on the Nintendo Switch, and you can get it on Steam, PlayStation 5. It's on a lot of things. However, Atari decided to actually go ahead and publish and produce cartridges of the original 2600 version that John started just as a passion project, which I think is really cool. So now, what is this game actually? Simply put, it is a really fun and really hard platformer. Now, seeing as this is a 2600 game, there's no story or anything given in the game. If you want to know what's going on, you're going to have to read the manual. And now that's the one thing about the presentation of this game that I don't like. And when you look in the box, you get, you have a very nice box, I will say. It is gorgeous, bright, colorful, and honestly, it's actually very representative of the actual game in a much more stylized way, unlike some older games like Mega Man, which the box art had nothing to do with the game. So when you open the box, you got the cartridge in this little sleeve, which I love. It's cute, and now granted, I'm not going to ever use the sleeve, it's just going to live in the box, but it's cute that it came with it. So the cartridge was in that, and then there was nothing else. There's no manual included with this, which I kind of, I understand from the perspective of you don't really need it to be able to play the game. Now I'll get to it when I start talking about the controls, but it's a very, very, very straightforward game to play. It's easy to figure out without having to look up anything. There's no manual included, which kind of annoyed me because there actually is a manual with a detailed story. And if you want to get it, you have to go to Atari's website, and under the listing for this game on Atari's websites, you can find a link to an online version of the manual. So now, I did end up printing out the manual because I just want to have it here. I'm probably going to fold it up and keep it in the box. But looking at the actual manual, you got a pretty detailed story here. So, reading directly here. Oh no, Leap, the dog, has begun wandering towards the Dark Realm, and if he ventures too far, he'll never find his way back. It's up to Mr. Run and Jump to race through 6 colorful worlds, bound over obstacles, dodge deadly enemies, and save his best friend before it's too late. The object of the game is to guide Mr. Run and Jump through the realms of color and luminescence to try and catch up with Leap before he gets lost forever in the Dark Realm. There are 6 realms you'll navigate through in order to achieve this goal, each of which is represented by a different primary color. Be careful though, the realms become more dangerous as the game progresses. So now that part of the story, it's actually fairly straightforward, and you can actually kind of understand what's going on without having to look at the manual, because at the start of every level of the game, you see a dog and it runs off and you in the direction of the stage where you have to go and follow it and complete the platforming challenges. Now, I would love to know how the dog gets through all these platforming challenges, because it's just a dog. But doesn't really matter. So it is interesting though that there is it's actually a fairly in-depth and detailed story. As simple as it might seem, it's fairly in-depth and detailed for the Atari 2600. A console like this, you don't generally expect much of a story, but there actually is one here, so that's kind of cool. So now, this isn't a platformer like Super Mario Bros. Where you have a nice smooth scrolling and whatever. This is a platformer that's much more like something like Celeste, where it's broken up into different screens of challenges and you have to progress through each screen. I did actually read an interview with John about the game where he said that basically Celeste and other games like that were never an inspiration or never really a thought when he was first designing this game. He was just going and doing it. He wasn't really trying to compare to games like that. So how do you go about completing these levels? Well, I think it's kind of obvious if you just read the title. You run and you jump. That's all there is to it. can't attack enemies, you can only jump over them or run under them, and if you get hit even a tiny little bit, you die and you go back to the start of the level. And that kind of simple gameplay is actually really good and really at home on a console like the Atari 2600, because it's not like you have a whole bunch of buttons on the controller. You literally just have your joystick and you have one button. And it makes the fact that you don't have to worry about like, oh, I pulled down on the joystick and press a button to do something or whatever. The fact that it's straightforward, move and jump is great. Now, you do have one other move, is that there are ladders in the game and you can actually climb those ladders, but I'm going to keep that in the category of running since that's literally just doing up on the joystick. So now I mentioned that you can only dodge or go, jump over or under enemies. So now obviously gotta talk about the enemies. So there are a few different types of enemies, which this is another place where I wish they had included the manual in the box, because in the manual there are actually some pretty detailed backstories about the different enemies. So I'm gonna actually read them directly from the manual because I love these descriptions and it's probably the easiest way to understand each enemy. So we are going to start with Bobs. Don't let their smiling faces fool you. Behind every Bob's friendly veneer ticks a soulless machine-like heart. Bobs know not of compassion. They know not of love or fear. They only understand a ceaseless compulsion to move up and down as if they are pistons in a horrifying contraption. Kind of a little bit dramatic, I know. But so, here are the Bobs, and yeah, it's literally they just move up and down and you gotta time your jumps over them, which is a little bit harder than you would think, especially if there are other enemies on the screen distracting you. Alright, moving on. The next enemies are Crush'ems. Though it's not commonly believed, Crush'ems were once inanimate fragments of the terrain. After suffering an eternity of shame and indignance due to be perpetually stepped on, the Crush'ems willed themselves to life so that they may finally stamp out those who showed them so little respect for so long. Okay, so again, very dramatic, but obviously this enemy was inspired by the swamps in Super Mario Bros. And it behaves exactly the same. As you approach the enemy, it starts stomping down from the ceiling trying to squish you, and if you run into the side of it or you run under it, you're gonna die. Honestly, the easiest way to get past them in a lot of cases I found is to jump over them, but you can go under them as well as long as you time it when they're going up. Alright, next up, Polyhedra. Although they are often mistaken for ordinary crystals, the Polyhedra origins are far from terrestrial, having descended from the stars some eons ago. Their coordinated motions appear too deliberate to be a naturally occurring phenomenon, yet they seem to lack sapience of any description. Many suspect the Polyhedra follow the will of an intelligent frequency only they can attune to. Their purpose in the realms is unclear. So the Polyhedra, simply put, they just move in a very uniform geometric pattern and you have to avoid them. There's not really much to them, and they're not that hard to get past, in my opinion. Although this one here going up on this ladder was kind of annoying the first time I found him. Alright, and last, probably the most annoying enemy in my opinion, the Skullin. These were once members of a mighty civilization that conquered stars and spanned the cosmos. For reasons long since forgotten, Skullin have been stripped of both their bodies and their sanity, thereby relegating them to their current primitive form. A common fixture in the realms, Skullin are savage hunters and fiercely territorial. Thankfully, they rarely venture beyond the perimeter of their usual stalking grounds. Simply put, the Skullin just move left and right or up and down on the screen, and they're a pain in the butt to get past. That's the simplest way to put it. They're just a pain. Specifically, these two right here. Trying to time your jumps to get over them is so hard. I died so many times. And besides the enemies, there are also some spikes that you have to avoid, and if you touch them, you die. So I will say, well, it's not a lot of enemies, it's only 4 real different types of enemies, 5 if you include the spikes. I was actually kind of impressed by the fact that they had so many and the fact that they're actually different. It's not like they're just retextures of the same enemy. They all have unique movement patterns and unique attacks that you have to learn to avoid. So I was actually really impressed by that. So I may have mentioned it earlier, but I love this game. It is really, really fun, but I don't know how it ends yet because it is ridiculously hard. According to the manual, there are 6 levels. I've only been able to beat 2. I haven't been able to get past level 3. It's ridiculous how hard it is. but it's fun. As hard as it may be, it is really fun and really addictive, to the point where, yes, I'm having a really hard time with it. Yes, it is extremely hard, and you'll spend hours trying to make one jump, but it is really fun. And because it's so hard, it's so satisfying when you actually make progress. Even if it's just 1 or 2 screens of progress, it is satisfying. And I'm going to be spending so many more hours playing this game because I want to beat it. I want to see what happens when you beat it. Now, I've reviewed quite a lot of games on this channel, and this is one of the few cases where I have to say, anyone who owns an Atari 2600, you need to get this game. It is so much fun. It is really addictive and really hard. It's not like a simple game where you're going to play it for an evening, beat it, and never want to play it again. It's going to take you a long time to master this game, so I highly recommend everyone give it a shot. And yes, it may be frustrating, but trust me, the satisfaction of actually beating a stage is well worth the frustration. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Have you played the Atari 2600 version of Mr. Run and Jump, or have you played one of the modern versions? I would love to hear what you think about either of them. If I ever actually beat the Atari 2600 version, I'm actually probably going to also get for the PC just to see how different it is, and I'll probably actually review that if and when that happens. But of course, let me know what you think about this game down in the comments. Well, until next time, so long.